Good evening, everyone. Thank you for coming tonight. We have an exciting program. We have Dr. Deb Haines, and she is going to do a program on the things she found in her walls when she remodeled her home. So thank you all for coming, and we'll get started right away. And if you can't hear okay, let us know and we'll turn it up.
What?
Always one of those.
Alrighty then. Okay, so hello and welcome. My name is Deb Haines, and this is my husband Nick, as you were told. And I'm a retired family doctor. I retired about 1.5 years ago, and I was in practice here in Altoona for 30 years. And Nicky still teaches at a private Christian school, and he teaches architectural design and mechanical design and art. We've raised all 4 of our boys here in Altoona, and they all graduated at Southeast Polk in 99, 2000, 2008, and 2013. So when our youngest son, Sam, was in college, Nick and I had decided to downsize our house in the country and move to the edge of town. And we were kind of drawn to this house that sat on the back of Sam Weiss, and really liked the yard, liked the fact that it backed up into a park, and really didn't mind that it was going to need a total overhaul, because that's kind of what we've done in the past with a couple other houses too, and what we're still doing right now. So we've renovated a lot of houses over the years. Let me start the slides. So the house is at 910 First Street East, and it's part of what's known as the Plummer Plat. And the original house that sits there is where the Sam Weiss Sports Complex is. So it was that farm.
Deb, can you get the mic closer?
Sure. Sorry. Sorry.
Maybe talk just a little bit slow.
Okay. Try that too. Okay. I got a lot to get through, so.
We'll stay.
I had it down to an hour, but if I slow it down, we might be here a little longer. But anyway, okay, sorry. Anyway, so the house originally, well, not originally, but for a long time, the house belonged to Cliff Plummer, and a lot of people are familiar with who he is. And he's the one who donated the land that eventually became the Sam Weiss Sports Complex. And I'll be talking about that family at the end of the program. And so today, the family that I'm talking about is a family that originally lived in the house about 50 years before the Plumbers. And they were the McLaughlin and the Farnham family. And these letters mostly go to Hattie Farnham, who was in her mid-20s when she was living in the house, and then her uncle Ed, who was in his probably late 30s. And the presentation mostly surrounds those two. I'm going to be using some pictures as representation of the family, but there was no photographs found in the walls. The letters talked about photographs, but they had been removed. So, yeah, you can go ahead and show them. So that's kind of what we've done with the house. We put on an addition. Anyway, so we put on an addition, and like we said, we took off all the plaster walls and put in drywall and really just gutted every room. So, we can go on to the next, just a couple of slides. So underneath that small window is where we found most of the letters. And you can go ahead and go on. And there's a hot porch that Nick put on. And if you could go ahead and go to slide. Yeah, you can go ahead and go to slide 5. So, there we go. So, before I introduce you to Hattie and her family, I want to discuss the world that they lived in. So we're going to start in 1902, and in the world at large, Queen Victoria had just passed away, and so it was really no longer the Victorian age. Her son, King Edward, was the king, and so it was the Edwardian age, or also known as the Golden Age. And in the United States and in Europe, there was a lot of people getting rich, but there was a lot of disparity between the classes. The fashion at the time was quite formal, especially for the wealthy. Women were still in corsets and long dresses and wore hats with plumes. Unless you lived on a farm, and then you probably looked like something straight out of Little House on the Prairie. But still with the long dresses and the bonnets. And men were typically in suits and hats. So there was relative peace going on in Europe, and World War I was more than a decade away. Next slide. In the US, Teddy Roosevelt was president. President McKinley had just been assassinated in 1901, and Roosevelt had become president. And then he ran for another term after that. The Spanish-American War had just ended, and we were in the middle of the Philippine War, but it was wrapping up. It was also considered the golden era. Roosevelt was known for establishing our national parks and starting the Panama Canal. He was the youngest president, starting at age 42. Around that time, the phone had been invented, but only 8% of homes in the United States had one. Homes generally did not have indoor plumbing. The Model A Ford was invented, but there were only about 8,000 cars in the US. Next slide. So, famous contemporaries of Hattie's would have been Helen Keller and also Laura Ingalls Wilder. The wealthy people of the era were the Rockefellers and the Carnegies. For pastime, vaudeville and ragtime music was popular. The best book in 1902 was Peter Rabbit by Beatrix Potter. And I'm not sure if that would have been up Hattie's alley. The Wizard of Oz was very popular, having been written in 1900. And in 1905, the best book was The House of Mirth by Elizabeth Wharton. And I'm wondering if that would have caught Hattie's interest, as it was about a single woman falling into poverty and trying to survive in high society. Next slide. So, what did Altoona look like in 1902? So, Altoona was established in about 1868, so it had been around for a while when Hattie got here. Thomas Haines was probably the best well-known person in town. He owned a grain mill. He also donated the land for Haines Park and had built the Haines Mansion, and in 1903, I think, was building the Haines Hotel, as the other hotel just burned down. I would like to point out that I am no direct relative that I know of to Thomas Haines. We looked, and we couldn't find him. He had adopted a niece and nephew, but he had no other direct descendants. So, go to the next slide. So Altoona was a bustling town in 1902. It had a well-established business area. The Altoona Herald was here, and besides a grain elevator, there was the Crawford and the Hudson grocery stores, and the Schaefer drugstore, and Porter's Hardware, and many other businesses and restaurants. There was a passenger train called the Interurban that connected Des Moines to Altoona and then beyond, and it ran several times a day. There was a 4-room schoolhouse with 70 pupils. For entertainment, besides the parks, Altoona had horse racing and baseball. At the time, Altoona had a team, as did Mitchellville and Bondurant. And then we also had a bike path to Des Moines. And then, of course, the Iowa State Fair was very popular, so I'm sure that Altoona was very booming at that time of the year. Next slide. Yeah, okay. So the first room that we gutted in the house was actually the room that we found 90% of the stuff in the walls. It was the primary bedroom on the southwest corner of the main floor. On the west wall of the bedroom, under a windowsill, is where we'd found most of everything. There was a lot of loose insulation, letters, newspapers, ads, farmer almanacs, calendars, you name it. Most of this dated from about 1902 to 1906, but there are some things there as early as 1896. Yeah, go ahead and go to the next slide. And so as you can see, none of this was organized. This was not bundled, this was not organized, it was mixed up in a lot of junk. The letters themselves were often not signed, and there was never a return address or name on the envelope itself. Some family members go by their middle names, and so that made it confusing for a while. There's 2 family members with the exact same name, so that confused me for a while. And as I said, no pictures of the family were found, but letters do speak of photographs. As we tore down the rest of the walls in the house, we were always really excited to see if we would find anything else. And besides that wall, there was very little that was found in other places. But we did find a couple of things. There was a couple of newspapers from 1927, and then a birth certificate from 1938. And I'll talk about those towards the end of the program. So I was still in practice, and I placed all this stuff in a plastic bin, and I didn't look at it for a decade. So then when I retired, I started sorting through it, and I started with the people in the family that got the most letters, and that was basically Hattie and Edward and Lucy, and then I organized them by year. And they, like I said, basically went from like 1902 to 1906. And then as I was putting this program together, I organized them into albums, and I dictated the letters after reading through them multiple times because they're difficult to decipher sometimes. And so Hattie has her own album, and Edward has his own album, and then the last album is just full of a lot of miscellaneous ads and newspapers and things like that. So. Next slide. So, this is my family. Took me a while to figure this out. So, Nancy is the matriarch of the family. And really, there's not much in the walls to Nancy. She had 12 children, and by 1902, at least 10 of them were still alive. She had lost her husband when the youngest, Edward, was a child. When they moved to Altoona, she was in her mid-70s and lived with her daughter Lucy and her son Edward and granddaughter Hattie. So I found nearly 60 letters from aunts, uncles, cousins that were addressed to Hattie, Lucy, or Edward. There was no letters to Nancy. I think perhaps maybe she didn't read because the family members would often ask about her, but they never wrote to her. And she didn't receive any advertisements or any mail at all either. So, Lucy had been married to a Civil War soldier 20 years older than her, and his name was Elijah Farnham. He died a year after they were married and when Hattie was a young infant. Lucy never remarried and lived with her mother and her bachelor brother and daughter. And then there are letters from family from Anita, Iowa, and that's where Hattie used to live with her family, and then Panora, Iowa. And they also came from family living in Nebraska and Kansas. Family appears to be very close-knit, and you can tell through the letters that they helped each other out a lot. There is not a lot of mention of Altoona directly in describing the day-to-day things that go on in Altoona because most of the letters are incoming and not outgoing. But I do know that the extended family relied and were very grateful for the goods that Hattie and Edward could easily find in Altoona and send to them. And there'll be examples of that read. Family also spoke often of going to the Iowa State Fair and then on to Altoona. And they spoke about the Interurban Railroad and riding to see the family. Next slide. So, these are just representations as we move along. So this is Hattie. Reading through these letters several times, a few themes emerged for me that I was able to learn some of the qualities of some of the family members. Hattie is a single lady in her mid-20s. She was born in 1877, and so was the age of Laura Ingalls' youngest sister, Grace, at the time. She plays a musical instrument of some kind, or she sings. She bakes a good pie. She is generous. She sends hand-me-down dresses to younger cousins and often sends things that family members have a hard time getting, like seeds, lace, cushions, dress patterns, and the like. She dreams of moving away from her mother to Des Moines, and this is not a very well-kept family secret. Her aunts and cousins tell her to follow her dreams, but in the letters, the dreams are vague. She has applied to college. She also did some sort of correspondent work for an advertisement company. I feel that Hattie plays her cards close to her chest. She is not a good corresponder with her family, and a recurring theme in the family is that she has not written back to them. I feel that she might be an introvert. I also think that maybe when she moved to Des Moines that she wasn't getting the letters that were being sent here to Altoona, and maybe that's why she wasn't writing people back. I feel that she strived for her independence from her mother, but was not necessarily looking to get married. And this is a bit unusual because in 1902, the average marrying age was 22, and only 20% of women worked outside of the home. So our next person is Ed. So Ed's a bachelor in his mid to late 30s when he moved here. He is a well-liked man by his family, as shown by letters written by brothers, sisters, nieces, and nephews. He has one nephew that's named after him, Edward Newton McLaughlin. Like I say, that confused me for a while. He was a farmer and he raised pigs and horses. Like Hattie, he is very generous with his family, often helping out his older brothers in Nebraska and Kansas. He writes well-written letters. He applied for a patent on a device, and I'm sure that he would have been well-known and liked by the Altoona business community. As horse racing was a pastime here, I think he would have liked to have gone to that. He also had dreams of his own. He often inquires about farmland in other states. He also dreams of travel, like going to the St. Louis 1904 World Fair. Next. So, this would be Lucy, my representation of her. I could not glean too much about Hattie's mom, Lucy. She does get some advertisement. She gets a few letters from her family. I know she does embroidery. But when the family writes for help, it is usually to Hattie or Ed. Her letters to Hattie are short and direct, and I feel that there's some tension there. Next slide. But not as much tension as what's going on in this gal's life. So this is Susan. Susan is the harried and stressed out sister of Edward. She's a spinster that lives with another brother, George, and they live in Panora, Iowa. George's wife has left him with 2 young children, Otis and Pearl, and Sue helps raise them. She writes in poor handwriting, often in pencil, always in run-on sentences with no punctuation, and she never signs her name. I just learned her handwriting. And probably my favorite character of the bunch is Estella. Estella is a single woman living with her family in Anita, Iowa. She's a little older than Hattie. She's probably Hattie's closest confidant. She's witty and funny and flirtatious and pouts. She likes fashion, church socials, and gossip. She frequently calls Hattie out on not writing back to her in melodramatic ways. Her father is James, the brother to Ed and Lucy, and then her brothers are Ed the nephew and Orden. And then, I didn't put a picture out for her, but also there was a sister Harriet that lived often with them, and so I had a handful of letters that were written to Lucy's sister Harriet. Well, actually, she had a sister Harriet, but she also had a daughter Harriet. It could have been either one of them. So, and then also, there was family from Nebraska. There was Sarah Henson, and she's married to George Henson. She has a daughter, Laura, and a son, Alonzo, and they move around a lot, and Laura is studying to be a music teacher. In Kansas, there's brother Dan, and he has daughter Ruby, and Ruby writes a lot, and also sisters Ellen and Carrie. And then there's also a brother Joe, and they also have daughters Faye and May, and Faye writes quite a bit. The Kansas clan have a tough time of it. They move around a lot. The letters are often about horrible weather and damaged crops. And that part of the family really reminds me of the Little House on the Prairie, Laura Ingalls saga. So, I think you can go to, here we go. Yeah, so just a couple examples of the letters. So I deciphered and dictated 57 letters coming and going from family members. And the first one is from 1886. It's not up there. It's really eaten up. And the only reason why I kept it is because it was the oldest one that I found. And it's from Ed the nephew to Ed the uncle. And so I won't be reading, obviously, we'll be here all night for all the letters, but I'm just going to read you some samples. This family exemplifies a typical Midwestern family in the early 1900s. They supported and loved each other. There were hard times and good times, successful and lost crops, tough winters, floods, farming accidents. There is death and lost marriages. There is dreams of something bigger. There is an unspoken tenseness between a mother and a daughter. There's a little romance, there's fashion, and a little bit of gossip, courtesy of Estella. So, we'll go to the first letter here. First readable letter in the wall comes from a school-age cousin, Ruby, and also her sister, Carrie. And she's in about 8th grade. So, from Rossville, Kansas, May 21st of 1903. Dear cousin, we got the box yesterday morning and everything was all okay and we were the happiest lot of kids you ever saw. We think our dresses are awful pretty. They're too large around the waist, but Mama is going to fix them. Mama sold eggs enough to get us a hat apiece. Earl's waist was awful nice. It was plenty large, but that was all the better. Mama is afraid it'd be too small as he has grown up so much since you saw him last. Danny's dress just fit him. We think it's the prettiest dress he ever had, but he doesn't think it's pretty because it's not red. It didn't make us a bit mad by sending us the old dresses. We would be glad to get all of them we could. Mama said any time you had any old dresses you didn't have any use for, to send them to us and she can make them over and do us a lot of good. Tell Grandma many thanks for the handkerchiefs and stockings. I'll tell you right now, we needed those things awful bad. Ruby and I hadn't had a new dress this spring. We're all going to Sunday school this Sunday. We like Kansas better and better all the time. We've had an awful lot of rain this spring. Papa isn't near done planting corn. Has Grandma got stout? You folks had better come out this summer and visit us and see how you like this country. Many thanks for the things. Believes us all well. Right soon, your loving cousins, Carrie and Ruby. Okay. So moving on. Just to get a feel for how Estella operates. This is letter number 1 from Estella, also written in about 1903. Dear cousin, I will try and write you one more time, and if it fails to reach you, I shall have to give up in despair, for I have wrote you 2 other letters, but you have not answered either of them. Why in the name of heaven have you not written to me anymore? Are you sick, dead, or are you tired of me and my letters? This is Sunday, and for a wonder, it's not raining as usual, as we've had so much rain and mud, and the men cannot go into the fields at all until yesterday. Ed got his plow all set up now and says it does fine work. Our folks are in the field today. You promised to come and see us again, so now you must come and be as good as your word. I guess I will stay at home and give you a chance. So I'm going to read a couple more from Estella. This one in particular, and I won't be reading full letters. Actually, just a few are just full letters. But this one really kind of gives a feel of everyday life that was going on in this family. So I thought I'd read this one. So Estella, McLaughlin, Anita, Iowa, March of 1904. Miss Hattie Farnham, dear cousin, I received your last letter and will try to answer it today. I have received a letter from Aunt Susan's since she was at your house. She told us about Aunt Lizzie's death, but we heard it before from Uncle Newton and Aunt Sally. She died the 17th day of January, I think between midnight and 1 a.m. Aunt Susan wrote that she had caught a hard cold when she was cleaning up their new house and that it caused her death. I think your pictures are pretty good, and I thank you for them. Is your new coat tight-fitting or loose? What color is it? And may I ask, what did it cost you? I got a letter of 8 pages from Laura. She's still teaching, and she says she bought a new piano, and it will cost her $3.50, and she says she's paid for about half of it. Do you suppose you heard about Uncle John's boy Raleigh's accident? So I would tell you. He's just the age of me and runs a clover huller. He was on the road last fall with his engine and huller, and he had the misfortune to go through a bridge, and it hemmed him under, and the coals of fire from the engine burned him on one side and steam on the other. He is now having new skin grafted on himself. He has never sat up since the accident. Aunt Sarah said last week that 16 friends volunteered and gave him skin to be grafted on his legs. He's written 2 or 3 letters to Aunt Sarah laying on his back. They say he's getting better now. Does the Rock Island Railway run through Altoona? Do you have to change cars in Des Moines or when you go from Anita to Altoona? Oh yes, I forgot to tell you about the social. Orden and I attended an oyster supper. It was a social and each lady took a carpet ball with her name on the inside and the boys bought the bulk and they had to unwind them to see who they got to sit with at supper. I had the good luck to eat with a gentleman by the name of William Duthie. He is invited to take dinner with us next Sunday. I hope you are coming up this summer on a visit. You know you promised to come. I would like to spend a couple weeks in Altoona if you will come and want me to. I will go home with you. I want a coat and a hat this next year. I must close for this time. I remain as ever your loving cousin, Estella. Okay, we'll go into some part of the scene. Yeah, that's where we should be. Yep. And so we're back to Ruby. And I won't read this all, but it's kind of cute. So remember I told you that 1902 we were in the conflict with the Philippines. So from Ruby and Carrie, Garden City, Kansas. Dear cousin, I will try to answer your letter which I received a long time ago. I expect you'll be more surprised when you hear that we have moved. I don't know where we will go next. I expect it'll be the Philippine Islands. We did not like it very well in Topeka. It was wet there and mostly raised wheat. Papa is going to try to raise wheat. He thinks it would be easier on him. He is sick most of the time and isn't able to do hardly anything. He can use a riding plow. I expect we'll have a pretty hard time of it until we can get our first crop in. Yeah, Susan. So, Susan, it was interesting because she was really hard to decipher her letters, but when I took the time to do it, all I really found out was that she was always complaining about George. And she's Susan McLaughlin, which I thought was married to George McLaughlin. I thought, okay, she's complaining to her sister-in-laws about George. But I found out that actually, they're brother and sister. And so, and she's helped raising his kids, and she's having a tough time of it. A short little letter from him, October 1904. As I went to town today, I will send you the money. I sent $4 today for a money order to Hattie Farnham in Altoona, and I will give you $1 more when I get it. Please be sure to write a telegraph personally so that George won't get my letter. Okay. Alrighty, so yeah, back to Estella. Yeah. So back to Estella. December of 1904. From Estella, December 1904. I will try and scribble you a few lines as I am full of news, so this letter will prove to you that no, I do not believe that you don't want to write, but when I do not get a letter from you in 2 to 3 months, then I think you're not very anxious for news. I believe I can interest you with this letter, at least I will try. No, dear, I did not put up those lace curtains yet, for I have kept them for myself. Ha ha. Then she goes on to say, did you pay anything in advance to get those letter writing affairs? Because by this time, Hattie's writing for an advertisement company. I got a new hat that just matches the color of my coat, and I also got a blue cap the other day. Hi-ho, here comes the news. We got a brand new steel stove, and I'll send you a picture. It costs $36. Now I hope you'll write as short a letter as I have, and I don't want to wait 6 months for an answer, so please write soon and tell us the news. I must close as I have only written 8 pages. Please write soon, your loving cousin Estella. Oh, let's see here. Oh, yeah. I think this is where I get up a little bit mixed up here. So there's several letters from Estella. Most of them come from Estella, and I'm not going to read them all. But also, in the next letter to her, she writes quite a bit of gossip, and she talks about a young lawyer in Atlantic that went crazy and was taken to the insane asylum in Florinda. So, yeah. And so, from Sue, Panora, February of 1905. As the snow is melting and people are beginning to move, I will try to send a letter to town. The roads are all out and passable only by horseback. No wagons or buggies can travel as the main lanes are as drifted as high as a horse. for 2 miles in a place. There is so much to shovel that people go through the fields and then it's still up to their waist. George has not been to town since the snow, and we've gone without things like sugar, coffee, and flour. I took a kind of chill in my lungs and could not rest night or day for 3 weeks, and I'm not over it. I cough all the time. Then I was up with Pearl one night for a whole week, and then I was up nearly all night with Otis the next week, and he had a fever of a high fever for 3 weeks and is not well yet. How is Ed getting along through these big drifts? You and Lucy and Harriet will have to wear good shoes or you will not make it till spring. Be careful falling on the steps and any place on the ice. Young people are falling on the ice and getting crippled. I forgot to tell you, I hung my pink bonnet on hook upstairs by your bed. Will you take it and wrap it so it does not get smoked? Hattie, I will write you a letter in a week or so and direct it to East Des Moines and tell you about music and the advantage of having a chance to go higher. But I wrote a letter now and can't write it in this letter. I could not send this letter out when I wrote it as the weather was so bad. I will close at this time. Hope you're all well. Don't let my letter lay around. You know who I mean. And she doesn't sign. The miscellaneous letters. This is from the first letter from George to a cousin that lives in Kansas, and it's addressed to Lucy, actually. Garden City, Kansas, February 1905. I got a letter from Hattie a few days ago. We've been down with the La Grippe for the last 6 weeks. The La Grippe is an old-fashioned term for influenza. And it's been the coldest year seen. The cold here chills a person almost to death. The light air goes right through a person. I want to get some seed potatoes, but there's nothing here but Colorado potatoes. Let me know what they cost and get them to me, please. How are you getting along this winter? How is Mama this winter? Has it been cold here? It's been anywhere from 16 to 25 degrees below. And so, Anita, Iowa, February 1905. My dear cousin. Well, dear cousin, I got your long-looked letter at last, and not a one bit sorry that you didn't think enough of me to answer mine. You spoke about a writing concern. Well, you can let it drop as far as I'm concerned, for I don't like to write so well as I used to either. And besides, I don't want to have to pass any money to get started. I think that's for writing for the advertisement agency. Ma has been so hoarse she cannot speak above a whisper for nearly a week, and we were afraid it would turn to pneumonia. You wanted to know how we put our time in. We cannot do anything but poke wood and coal in the stove, and that's all we can do to keep from freezing. I haven't been to any Bible reading since we met at our place 5 weeks ago. WD says, I guess you had the chance to bake a lemon pie or your own stove for him during the holidays. Were you ashamed of his visit, or why didn't you mention it in your last letter? I didn't get a thing for Christmas or my birthday except for a sack of candy. But I think that you were extra well remembered. What is the matter with the skirt that you got with your blue jacket? I like my coat okay, and so does Mom. Many thanks for those pieces that you sent. Now, don't go kick up your heels just because none of us came down for Christmas. You want to be ashamed if you're not satisfied with all the company you had. You spoke of having a telephone. Of course, it would be nice, but if you care to correspond with me, I will do my part in writing. I guess Anita will hold another picnic next summer. If Aunt Susan comes up, then I might go home with her. Now I have one more question I wish you to answer. How in the name of common sense did WD get my name? Did he ever ask you anything about me? I expect you think it's funny that I'm writing with a pencil, but I lost the main part of my pen. I will close before my hand plays out. I am forever your cousin, Estella. Keep it with there. Let's see here. I don't want to read the whole entire thing. Oh, okay. A little more gossip from Estella. So, Anita, Iowa, August 1905. I could not imagine why you waited a whole week to let us know that you got safely home. You told me that we better let certain things rest, but please remember, I've had nothing to do with the story he would not reveal to you. I think I understand him pretty well.
I'm sorry for your sake, but he had Myrtle out again last Sunday evening and the same evening that the camp meeting closed. I do not like him one bit the way he is using you. I think it's you that better go pulling hair instead of me. For you know, I can flirt as well as the Reverend C, and for my part, I don't care if he goes with a different girl every day in the week and 2 on Sunday. So you can see my heart is not very badly affected. By the way, I sent a letter to Havelock a few days ago. Hattie, won't you please send me a pattern of your blue skirt, and if you do, I will return the favor. This is Monday morning. By the way, how would you like it? This is Monday, and so I will finish my letter. W was out last night with the same girl. What do you think of that? Or maybe you don't thank me for letting you know. Papa talks of going to Des Moines about Wednesday, and nothing happens to prevent him. He'll go directly to the fair and then down to Altoona in the evening. So you can look for him at your place Wednesday evening if you do not happen to see him at the fairgrounds. Must close or the letter will go before I get it to the box. Ever your loving cousin, Estella McLaughlin. And then this is hysterical. If you look at the PS, she writes in code at the end. After this, I will 19-5-14-4. Yeah. And then anyway, it goes numerically with the alphabet. So it doesn't take Sherlock Holmes to figure it out. Basically, it says, I will send your letters to East Des Moines. And then we're on to the girls. Okay, so about this time, hang on just a second. So we knew that Hattie moved to Des Moines in about 1905, and she's working in Des Moines, and there's a few short letters that go back and forth between Hattie and her mother. And it's interesting that even the letters that are sent to Des Moines end up in the house in Altoona. Again, the letters are always short, formal, to the point, and never affectionate. So this is the first letter that I found to Des Moines, actually, from Lucy to Hattie in June of 1905. Hattie, if you can't come home, be free Saturday. I'm coming up Saturday, and you can fix your clothes to go to the camper meeting with me after you've been changed. I will wait at the depot for you so you can get something to eat before we get out. Your mother, Lucy. I will be there when you quit at noon. Hattie is staying somewhere in Des Moines, but she's written to a boarding house, and they don't want to take anybody else. This is later. This is in December of 1905, and they don't want to take anybody else for the winter. She writes to her mother that she's looking for work, but then writes a few days later the letter that she is working, but I never really know what type of work that she does. Later that winter, she does write that she's having problems with her throat. She writes to her mom, from Hattie to Lucy, December 26, 1905. I will write a few lines today. The doctor said my throat could be cured, but it would take time. They said the nerves are partially paralyzed and would take a good while to bring them to. I will not write any more at this time, for I cannot make this pen work. Your daughter, Hattie. And then just a couple, that's postmarked on December 26th. She probably wrote that at Christmas, but there's no message. There's no message of Merry Christmas. Anyway, so a couple weeks later, I'll write a few lines today to let you know that I went down and talked to Taylor yesterday. He said he'd work at my tooth at noon and save me from losing half a day, so I will begin tomorrow at noon. But on Saturday noon, I would want to go down to the music store. So you can come to town any day you want to, but the next time you're here at noon, go to the post office at the south door. I always go by there on my lunch past the post office. I will come home Saturday night, a 6 o'clock car, and be there by 7. This is all I write at this time. Your daughter, Hattie. I think I've gotten just a little mixed up here. So this is back to Ruby. I won't read the whole letter, basically, because it says it right there. We planted those potatoes you sent, and we didn't get our seed back. The grasshoppers and worms came in and ate everything up. And they've moved again. That's the, okay, sorry, that's the one, yeah, that's just Hattie writing to his mom about her sore throat. This one's kind of a harried letter from Susan. Just a second. So I believe that this is Susie DeLouis, March 29th of 1906. Miss Lucy Farnham. I had no chance to write and tell you the news Monday, but I will write a few things. I just got back the presents that Pearl gave away the first day we got home. The same afternoon, Pearl and Otis went up to the schoolhouse, and Pearl took them the prettiest ribbons and the new fine garters and the finest handkerchiefs and the writing paper that was given to her, and she bundled them up on the side while I was working through the dirty tables and chairs to get a bit of dinner. And Otis took 4 cents of his money and a good pen and his rough handkerchief and gave all these things to the people that had plenty to do without roofing our pitiful house. The teacher made them all give them up, and I wrote to her and sent word the next morning and was worried that I'd only get part of them back. I had to wade through the mud to hunt for the rest of them. I found the bow that Harriet gave her. When you write about them, use a different sheet of paper and not your main letter, for if George knew, he would nearly beat them soft if he found out. I am firm to paper this room and do all I can with the washing and mending the clothes, for I am nearly sure that I can't stay here this summer. I wouldn't get $6 more if I could stay here till November. Pearl wrote a letter to Eddie, or some of you, to send her pocketbook that she had left at your house. I want to tell you to keep her money over there at your house. She is engaged to give it away as soon as it comes. When you send her dress or anything, just send her an empty pocketbook and put the rest in the bank. George doesn't know that Pearl and Otis gave all the presents up at the school. Otis has a bad cough and vomits when he eats. George had gotten a new hog, and Otis was helping him in the mud, and Pearl and Otis went straight off in the frozen mud and walked 1 mile in the deep mud and came back nearly dark, and Otis got a cold, and he's lost so much weight that I can carry him. Pearl is hanging on to all the wagons that pass on the road. It's not caused by any fussing at the house, but that is her nature, to follow the boys and the men. And when I can't get her back, by no means, I am justified myself to be here. I must close now. How's Mammy, and how is her cough? How is Eddie? He was not well when we left him. I forgot to tell you that I didn't know that Pearl wrapped up some of your cake and then took another chunk of it in a hurry. After I got home, I saw she had all of your cake. This was a mistake. Again, not signed. So when I first read through this letter, I thought, oh boy, Pearl's got to be 15, 16, and she must be a handful. But then, after looking at Ancestry.com, I found out Pearl's 10. So I'm thinking we don't have to be worried about Pearl. And then a cousin I hadn't talked about too much, but this is Laura from Kansas, who writes that, I expect you'll be greatly surprised to hear I am married. It was a quiet affair. We were only acquainted 6 months. He's a good young man and has no bad habits. We couldn't let you know beforehand, as we didn't decide for certain ourselves until the day before. Okay. Basically, this is just from Susan again. I won't read it all, but she just wants to leave. She's finding it hard to get any work in Panora. She's having a lot of stress trying to manage the distressed children, and she thinks that George works him too hard on the farm. And I don't know. I didn't grow up on a farm, but maybe that's what every farm kid did. But she thinks that he would run these kids to eternity in a short time, but thank God school's starting again. And just the last letter that was found in the wall from Hattie to Lucy in September of 1906. And you can read it, but it said, I will write you a few lines to let you know that Carrie and I are coming out Sunday. We will start here at 10:15 and get to Altoona at 11:05. She is going to bring the records, and I am going to try and get a horn to bring. I will bring cake with me, so you don't need to bake any. Hattie. So this is September of 1906. Lucy was born in September. I'm thinking this is a birthday party. So our last letter ends on at least more pleasant terms. So There's a lot of other things. You can go ahead, next one. There's a lot of things for Hattie in the wall, and I'll just kind of whip through them kind of quick here. This was really interesting, I thought. So this is 1904, and this is basically an acceptance letter from Highland Park College, admitting her into the shorthand program. And like I say, I don't know if she ever did take classes with them, but she got an acceptance letter. These are funny. There's all kinds of funny advertisements in the walls. And this one is obviously a picture of Teddy Roosevelt. And if you count all the circles on his tie and guess the number and send it in, you can win $150 grand prize. And the second prize is a piano. So she makes a guess. She writes down 160, but she never sent it in. Next slide. So we know that Hattie was musical in some sort. This is a theater program that I found from the Foster on Grand Auditorium. And I thought this was kind of interesting because it actually starred somebody somewhat famous at the time. It was a play called Someday, and it starred Ethel Barrymore and John Barrymore, and just kind of brought the Wikipedia picture of Ethel Barrymore, but I think she looks a lot like her great niece, Drew Barrymore. And here's some advertisements that you could just see in the theater program itself. They're just so funny. So if a girl is in love with a boy, that's her business. If a boy is in love with a girl, that's his business. If they get married, that's their business. But if they want furniture, it's our business. I was like, this was cute too. It says, I want a wife. In fact, I want every man's wife to send for a bottle of my silver cream polish. So, often tongue-in-cheek, a lot of times they're a little politically incorrect. This one's hysterical. Oh, I'm glad I can read this. I wasn't sure I could. This is a beauty advertisement to Hattie, and this cracks me up. So, the top one reads, beauty is to a woman what courage and strength are to a man. It's the source, the foundation of all her strength, all her power. It is the lever by which she moves all men to her purpose. It's like, and down in the other letter, it's really funny. It says, it is a woman's part in life to be admired and sought after, and if she is not, it's her own fault. All right. So quickly on to Ed, and he doesn't take nearly as much time as Hattie, but like I said, Ed was a good guy. He was very well liked by his family. They write to him often. They ask him for a lot of things. And they talk to him about the bad crops and the bad weather. So, and you can kind of read through them, but it just talks about, we had the wettest season I'd ever seen. The creek was the highest I've seen it in 30 years. We had the finest prospect for corn, and then it rained every other day for 8 weeks. I'll send you the $150, but you don't need to send me a receipt. And that's from Joe from Kansas. And he's always sending them pigs and everything. Pigs, plows, musical instruments. He sent a nephew an accordion and another one a violin. Estella writes to him, I thought that's funny. Or likes the accordion, but his arms hurt from playing it. Please tell Hattie to write to me. Also, Ed gets a letter from George stating that he had just been to the St. Louis 1904 World Fair and said that he had the time of his life, which is pretty good because George is the one that lives in Panora. So it was good that he got away to St. Louis. I have really good World Fair pamphlets and maps. I have a few of those in the photo albums. They were well preserved. And then just a few other little excerpts from his letters. Basically, he thinks about moving to Colorado, and his brother tells him not to. He's like, I would never go to Colorado. Stay where you're at. I'd go where you are. Talks about the cold. I don't see how I can live in a country here. Kansas is a poor state all over as far as I've seen. And then also, again, he was a horse dealer, and so there was a letter from Farley in Des Moines. Dear sir, if you've not disposed of that big horse I sold you yet, how would you like to change him in on a stallion? And this was a letter, actually, this is a copy of a letter. So this was from George Henson, who sent it to Sarah Henson, who's one of the sisters of Ed. And basically, it made the news. There was a big flood in Beaver Valley, and it knocked out the telegraphs, it knocked out the railroad stations and the railways. And George is stranded and can't get home. So Sarah cannot get home for 2 weeks. 3,000 hogs, cattle, and one family have drowned. It turns out she was supposed to meet him where they were at family, and she took off because of the bad weather, so now he doesn't know where she's at. And says, I'm worried about our home. I hope you get through it all right and all well. Your loving husband. And there's the corresponding letter, newspaper article that goes with it. Next slide. Okay, and then not only was Ed a farmer, but he also was an inventor of sorts. He writes a letter to a patent company about a device that he had created for runaway horses. And the letter that I have here with the Rough Rider Teddy Roosevelt stationery is a draft letter. So he just kind of drafted a letter talking about this design that he has and wants to know if it's good enough for patent. And they look it over, and they did send him a certificate of patentability and tell him that they think that his idea has merit. So for now, that kind of wraps up the Farnham and McLaughlin family. And then we jump 25 years. We didn't find anything else in the walls until 1927, and there's just a few items. So this here is a newspaper from, I think it's January of 27, and that says, Lucky achieves the ambition. Basically, that's Charles Lindbergh. He's nicknamed Lucky, and he's meeting with the Prime Minister of Belgium for an award because he just made the first transatlantic flight. The interesting thing about that, if you go to the next slide, Nick, is that 3 months later, he was in Altoona. Charles Lindbergh was here, and he commissioned our airport. And so I don't know that everybody knows that I think Altoona had one of the first airports in Iowa, and it's basically where Adventureland sits now. And I don't know if that's exactly a picture of when Lindbergh was there, but also Amelia Earhart had been there as well. And then the Ladies' Home Journal on the left, I did not find that on the wall. I was looking for a periodical of the Times, and so I found this at Grandpa's old barn up at the Iowa State Fair. So it's a Lady Home Journal in really good shape from November of 1902, and its main story in the magazine is an interview with Helen Keller. What I did find in the wall was another big jump from 1927 to January of 1940, and this is, again, a Lady Home Journal, and its biggest article was an article on Gone with the Wind. And I have that here. And then a couple items that we did find a couple medicine bottles that were in really good shape in the wall. I'm thinking that I should have been a physician in the early 1900s. I think it would have been a lot easier. Apparently, you could buy an elixir and a tablespoon of it would cure every disease known to man. And that brings us up to January of basically 1931. So this is a very eaten up birth certificate of Lois plumber. Yeah, so this was found also in the main bedroom on a different wall from the letters. And so there's an interesting story that goes with this. I'll tell you quickly. I had put everything away for a decade, and we had worked on the house. And when we were almost done with it and had done a lot of work, we had invited the Johnstons, who sold us the house, to come over and see what we had done. And I pulled out the bin and I showed it to them, and I showed them this birth certificate. And Dolores Johnston said, "Oh yeah, I know Lois. Yeah, she married a Heartline." And I said, "Well, that's interesting. I dated a Heartline." And I said, "Yeah." I said, "Do you know Ross Heartline?" She said, "Oh yeah, I know Ross. That's Lois's son." I was like, how crazy is that? It was like, okay, so yeah, I'm living in Ross's grandparents' house. That's funny. And so shortly before this program, I did get a hold of Ross, and I told him that I had his mom's birth certificate, also in a birthday card to his grandma. And those are two things I found from that family, basically. And asked him a few questions about the house, some of the way it was designed, and just some of those types of things, and also to see if he could confirm the story. Because the Johnstons had told me that Ronald Reagan, when he worked for WHO, liked to play cards with Cliff at our house. And Ross could neither confirm or deny that, but he did say that his grandma was good friends with Senator Grassley. So he said it wouldn't surprise me. They said his grandpa knew everybody, so it would have been no surprise to him. Couple little things we found just in the closet. Don't know if that was original wallpaper, but there's a little piece of wallpaper there, and then also some very old linoleum type flooring. And then this is a children's version of Charles Dickens novels, and so it's basically a little summary of like his most famous novels rewritten for kids. The copyright on this is 1917. And so I don't know what family that belonged to. Might have been the family in between the McLaughlins and the Plumbers. And then it brings us back to a very well preserved calendar from 1905. And so that brings us back to Hattie, because I wanted to end with Hattie. So bringing us back full circle to Hattie. So here's what I know about Hattie. She was known for her pies. Her family did not stay in Altoona very long. Her grandmother, Nancy, died in 1907. The very much stressed out Susan's sister Susan died in 1908. Ed remained a bachelor and lived around the Des Moines area his whole life. Estella also never married and remained in Anita, Iowa. Pearl, the mischievous and precocious 10-year-old, that liked to give away her Christmas presents and wave at the boys if they passed by on their wagons, lived into her 90s, and she lived in Bondurant and still has family in the area. And so what has become of Hattie? Well, Wilfred, or William Duthie, who's known as WD in the letters, must have really liked her pie. They were married in 1912. I'm glad that they did not honeymoon on the Titanic. So I find it remarkable that they were married 7 years after he came over for pie. And it's hard to speculate what happened in the years between. A census that I found showed that she worked for a bookbinder. I would like to think that she followed her music in some capacity. According to U.S. Census, her mother did live with her in her later years. I think Hattie always knew that her mother would live with her, but if she married young, then that may have happened right away. I think Hattie needed to have her independence and would only gain that as a working single woman. She did go on to have 3 children. One daughter died in infancy of pneumonia. A son had an adopted son, and his family still live in the Iowa City area. And then there was a daughter that married a man named Brown. Browns are really hard to track down on Ancestry.com. And so I haven't been able to fully research them. I've not been able to reach any living relative. I kind of ran into a dead end on Ancestry and kind of ran into a dead end on Facebook as well. And that pretty much wraps up my program. I would like to thank Oh, well, then my last one. Don't know where this came from. So this is from Yonkers, probably also in the 1940s. I don't think that Yonkers was here in the early 1900s, but again, very well preserved. So I would like to thank my husband Nick for his patience and helping me put together this slideshow. I think he did a really good job. And then also would like to thank my friend Judy Keller for helping me with some research and just lending an ear and showing an interest in my work. And then also like to thank Dawn because she helped me with research and listened to my ideas for the program. And if anybody wants to come up and take a look at the photo albums and the artifacts that we have, I'd be happy to talk to you about them.
That was a great program, wasn't it?
Yeah.
You never know what you're going to find in the walls. We would love to have you come back again and visit the museum, and we'd love to have you be a member. We do a lot of fun things here, and we've made a lot of progress over the last few years. So we'd love to have you be a part of that. I'm Dawn, and I'm the president of the Historical Society. We also have quite a few board members here. We have Phyllis Murphy, and she kind of passes out posters. She does everything, and she knows everyone too. And John and Ellen are back there. They are on the board. And we also have Herb and Helen here, and they are also on the board. Chantel and her father. And do we have any more? Besides Danny? Nope. All right. Thank you, everyone, for coming tonight. Hopefully, we'll see you next month. The program next month is going to be Patricia Coffey is going to do a program on the old stories from Altoona. So you'll be seeing that on Facebook being advertised. So we look forward to seeing you in May. Yes, you may have a question.
Why do people find letters, papers, all that stuff in walls?
I think it was insulation.
That's what I wondered.
I really, I don't think they were being saved as a time capsule, or they would have taken better care of them. But yeah, I think it was just insulation.
A lot of these old houses are what's called bloom framing, so the boards go all the way up those stories. So that loose batting insulation wants to settle, so they shove whatever they can find into the wall. We found a dog collar, no dog, and some other stuff in there. Just like I said, to hold the insulation up. And under windows, under those kind of things are usually where you find them. And that's where they want to settle.
They are, most of these are preserved, and they are incredible for being in a wall for 100 years, over 100 years. So feel free to come up and take a look at them. We'd love to have you take a look and see what's in there. Thank you again for doing the program.
our best.